Good afternoon.
Oh, okay. You want to go get it? There you go. Here it comes. Okay. Hey, uh-oh. The wind got it.
Good job. Good job. Good afternoon. This is an extraordinary day, and so was yesterday, and even the day before. It's so cold. I mean, chilly. For June the 21st, no, the 22nd. Yesterday was the solstice.
Yeah, first day of summer.
And I did release a video yesterday, so this one will be posted in a few days. But duly noted, it is June the 21st. Can you believe, Deb?
No, you wouldn't know if that's the way it feels.
Jeez. I don't remember a summer. I mean, yesterday was the first day of summer. I don't remember ever, really, such a cool spring. Okay, bring it back. Oh, let me get to the business of at hand, which is, I'll be done in a few minutes, Deb. I just want to do a quick update because I haven't done a video here yet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to talk about, so I'm going to do it in two parts, I think, if the viewers don't mind. I can get a little long-winded, as you know.
Yeah.
There's so much to show, but it's going to be mostly figs. So you fig enthusiasts, what I call figsters altogether, be patient. I just want to talk for a moment about some of these persimmons trees. Magnificent. There's a little, I showed that last year. That was a little fig garden, and I started up some Ronde Bordeaux and some Smith, and they're doing quite nicely. And they wintered without any protection, which is really incredible. I've gotten away with murder the last couple of years. I haven't covered, and I'm going to take it as far as I can because it seems like we're in a pretty good pattern of warmer winters. I've experienced that over the years before, and I've experienced where they were back-to-back brutally cold, and if you didn't protect your figs, they would be dead to the ground in the spring. So I've got a little damage, but not much. I could go on and talk about all this, but here's some beautiful Sagio persimmons. This tree is bearing a lot of fruit abundantly this year. Every year. You've seen it in videos before. Look at all the abundance of fruit on this tree. It's truly magnificent. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And they're one of the best. I've talked about it. But I wanted very quickly to address this tree because I made a video last year, Break My Heart Pruning, which you can find in my collection. And the wind had broken several of the branches, and they were laying all over the ground. Persimmons were on the ground, and the tree was hanging down. Here I have it, a big rebarb holding this tree up the last couple of years because it was leaning down from the weight of the persimmons. And I mentioned that I was going to have to do some drastic things, cut this tree back drastically, which I have done, and I should have made a video for you persimmons lovers out there to show you exactly how I did it, but you know, I can only do so much, and I have several properties. This one's in 7A, this is my New Jersey property. The last two videos I made were taken in 7B, located in my Virginia property. So I've done 2 updates in Virginia, but nothing in New Jersey yet. So today's going to be, and it might be a 2-parter unless I stop yakking here and get to business. But I cut this back tremendously. You will see it in the other video I mentioned, Break My Heart Pruning, and this is the Nikitas Gift. And look at it. I mean, I cut it back drastically. You can tell when you look at the other video. But it still looks good. It's beautiful. And now it will form better. It still has plenty of fruit. You can see the fruit. There will be plenty to eat this year. Look. it's fruiting abundantly, as it always does. Nikitas Gift, one of my very, very favorite fruits, not just persimmons, in the world that I've ever experienced. And I've grown fig trees, apple trees, pear trees, you name it, plum. I've had so many different types of fruit trees, and persimmons and mulberries, and the list goes on and on. But this was one of my favorites. Of course, figs are probably at the top of my list altogether as a general category of. She loves to play. So we looked at that, and it's doing wonderfully, and it's going. And these now, all the energy will be directed from all of those lower branches and the branches that I took away, and it did kind of break my heart, but not really, because look at the result. Look at the final result. It's going to be a superior tree. It's going to hold its own weight. I'll be able to take the rebarb off at the end of this year, and it will stand on its own volition. Okay. And the fruits will be voluptuous, because all of the energy will go into the fewer fruits, because it's been by process, it's been culled, and through the pruning process, and there are less fruits, and so more energy directed into those fewer fruits will result in more exquisite tasting persimmons, larger and more voluptuous. Okay, so now let's get into the figs real quickly. I'm very, very happy with everything. The winter was kind of harsh, but not like it would normally be, I guess, or like it has been in previous years, some previous years. It went down to 8 degrees one night, but it was only one night. And I have very minor damage, none on this tree. This is a very good variety that I showed last year. And this is an example of a Mount Aetna variant. We talked about this many times, where it does have a few slightly distinguishing characteristics from your general hardy Chicago types. This is Sicilian Dark, as it was named when I acquired it quite a few years ago. And I grew it in a pot one year and a couple of years, and then I put it in the ground. It's been in the ground, I don't know, 4 or 5 years now. And it is a workhorse of a Mount Aetna, and has an exquisite flavor compared to some of the other hardy Chicago types. And it's very, very fruitful, which is not uncommon to any of the hardy Chicago types, or Mount Aetnas as they call them. It is very, very, very fruitful, abundantly so, consistently so, all over the place so. It's just figs and figs, and like I like figs, give me some figs, I love them. And this tree certainly is a perfect example of the type of fig tree that I strive for. You know, through the years, I just keep, striving and trying to refine my efforts. And this certainly passes scrutiny, and it's everything that you would want in a fig tree for my harsh climatic zone. Okay, and it is a little cut above, like MultiBlack, but a different than MultiBlack, by the way. And so I highly recommend this. Sicilian Dark. And uncharacteristic to myself, I don't usually get into where did I get this or all of those kinds of things. Because there's just so much to talk about. But I love this tree so much. I don't know if anybody's talking about it out there or not, but I did get this fig tree years ago, quite a few years ago, from Big Bill, near Lancaster, off the beaten path nursery. So I don't know if he still has it in his collection, but if he does have the original Sicilian dark that he sold to me, this is how you can get this tree. And I would highly recommend that you waste no time buying it. Seriously, if it's the same, and he's a very, very honest grower, he'll tell you if he still has it. And hopefully, if he does, he'll sell it to you. And you will be as happy as I am happy with this particular Mount Aetna. Now I've worn that out. So where should I go? I always love my wind chimes, wherever they may be, and I have them all over the place. Beautiful. I love the way they sing to me. And over the time, I've familiarized myself with their melodies. But this is a grafted Nikitas Gift, which I grafted a couple years ago. And I've got to now straighten it up. It's growing next to another variety, which is not, it's an American variety, and I can't go into this right now. Let me go back to the figs. But you can see it's very fruitful. Nikitas Gift it's just a young tree, but look at all these fruits. Look, just loaded with fruit. I've got to straighten that out, and I will. I'll put a high rebarb and tie it up so it'll grow straight and tall. Maybe I'll nip off these fruits too, and the top of this tree, so it'll get thicker on the bottom and be able to better support next year's harvest. I have plenty of fruit. Still have some blueberries. I've been picking a lot of blueberries for a long time. I love my blueberries. I have what I think is an interesting video on blueberries and a couple ideas that I share in that video if you want to watch it. This is a wonderful blueberry variety from Australia. But we're not talking blueberries today. And so we're talking figs. So let's look at some figs. You can see that they're just doing splendidly. I love my figs. This is Ronde Bordeaux, one of the Ronde Bordeaux I have in the ground in 7-8, in 7A. I have a couple in the ground we talked about before in 7B. And it's always fruitful. It's one of my top figs in my collection. I love Ronde Bordeaux, so we won't go into that. But plant one, that's all. I just love it. And of course, this is the all faithful, ever faithful, very healthy and vigorous Celeste tree. Always reliable. Getting rather large, and I'm going to have to cut this down probably the end of this year all the way back down, like I've done in many of the trees that I show you in my videos. I have to, so that I can care for them. I try to keep them smaller. Of course, Celeste only produces fruit that stays on. It will produce brie, but they all fall off. We talked about that before, but it only produces fruit that will ripen, main crop figs, on new growth. And so when I cut it down, it's going to be quite a sacrifice in terms of the number of figs I'm going to get next year. It's going to be a drastic reduction, but that's okay. I have other trees in other locations, and there's a community tree that I've talked about in some of my videos. I get plenty of figs, and I've got so many to eat that I can't eat them all anyway. So what has to be done has to be done. So next year that tree will be cut all the way down to the ground practically. And then I'll select, as I've spoken to you about this, talked to you about it in other videos, I will select the strongest and the very best shoots that come up. I'll select them. 10 shoots, 12 shoots, 15 shoots will come up, 20. And I'm not exaggerating. Look how old this tree is. This tree's been here over a quarter of a century. And so I'm not exaggerating to you when I tell you. When I cut this down, shoots will emerge everywhere, and I will look at them closely. I will examine them, and I will determine human selection, not natural selection. human selection. I will determine the shoots that I will permit to grow into this. To grow into this. They will be the most vigorous, the strongest, the most productive. They will be the best, the healthiest. And that's what I will permit to grow up. And we've talked about that in other videos. And so I'm just reiterating that for you, the point. Okay? Here's another tree, and I'll move on. This is LSU O'Rourke, and I've featured this in previous videos, and it's doing quite well, as you can see, and it's going to make lots and lots of figs. So it survived the winter. Here's a Peter's honey that I featured before. A couple branches died back, and I had to do some pruning too, but I'm happy because the main branches survived, and it's going to be fruitful. And it's making lots of figs, as you can see. Look at them. Look at all the figs. So I'm very, 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 very happy that this tree survived yet another winter uncovered in 7A. I'm extraordinarily happy. And we'll go over to here. This is LSU Tiger. And do I need to say many good things about it? Nah, not really. Because you've seen it before in the past in my other videos, and you can see it now with your own eyes, just how productive it is. And healthy and vigorous. There's going to be a lot of figs here to eat this summer. I'm going to do my very best to eat them all. I'll share some, of course. But I'll try not to let any go to waste. This is a prolific bearer, and it did, as you can see, fabulously, all on its own with no covering. Got away with murder. Maybe I should name this video that. Figs, getting away with murder. I don't know. We'll see what I'll name this. This is a progress report. And this is Alma. I've talked about it before, from the University of Alabama in their experimental program. And it is also very fruitful, characteristically, and it did very well. I have a couple dead branches here and there, nothing much. I pruned them away, and it's just getting stronger and stronger and bearing more and more fruit. And this will bear fruit all the way into the fall. It's a little bit later, as I mentioned in previous videos. A little bit later than most of my other figs. But it's still early enough that it's still hot and the nights are still warm, that there's never a problem with all of them coming to fruition. And they ripen pretty quickly. It doesn't go real late. You know, maybe a few stragglers, but most of them get ripe within a couple of weeks, and so it's a bountiful harvest that you can always rely on. Now here I had a little bit of problem. It's a little further from the house. Here we talk about those microclimatic variations or differences. And what do I mean by that? You know, being near the home, being near the house, being near the brick on the south side, near the south side, is a microclimate. So we talk about microclimatic differences. You see, those trees are closer to the house, and the house is blocking the predominant winds that come from that direction. Now, this is a little further away, and though it is a Mount Aetna, this year he took a little bit of a hit. So half of the tree, especially the side that's not being protected by the house as much, where the wind comes barreling through here, because of it's a little further away. That's just my speculation. Another one of those variabilities that you can't really substantiate or prove in any way. Half of the tree died back pretty much. And it cracked. Look at that. This tree will put new shoots out, and I'll nurture them, and I'll get this tree back to where I want it to be. But half of the tree survived nicely, and every branch is just loaded with fruit. Look. So why do I want to dispense of the entire tree when I'm going to get plenty of delicious fruits, lots of them. Look at them all. Look, from branch to branch. Look at all that. I'm not going to cut this tree down or, get rid of it in any way. No, I'm going to eat those figs. That's what I'm going to do. And I'll wait for the bottom shoots to come up, which they're doing already. In fact, I could take some of this winter mulch now. I should have gotten rid of this. That's okay. There's not much there. And I'll let more shoots come up and easier. Okay, that's good. Now here's a story I told before. This is my MultiBlack, which I love MultiBlack. And yet another of those slight variations within a certain fig group, the Mount Aetnas. I love the flavor of it. I love the size of it. I love everything about it. I'm not going to speak ad nauseum with regard to this particular cultivar anymore. I can only tell you, I'll reiterate one thing, the story about how there were two big branches coming out of the ground, trunks, and I ran over one of them with my lawn tractor when I tried to squeeze through here. And so I squished this one to the side. So this poor tree hasn't had a good chance to survive as well as it would have if I hadn't run it over with my tractor. But it keeps producing fruit every year, and I've got to make a copy of this soon, and I probably will do a copy if I only could find the time, and do a couple air layers and get this started again nearby, or get a shoot to come up. But curiously, I don't get many shoots coming up, and it's very unusual, this MultiBlack, in that regard. Another observation, another one of those variables. Other figs always put shoots out all the time. But this one, I've been waiting for a couple of years, three years now, 4. And it just doesn't put any shoots out. Why? There we go again. Let's go over here and talk about, oh, by the way, the reason why I have this here is to keep the water. It's not just to keep it away from the house. The white would do that. The black scares the birds. They think it's a snake, and it really works. But more importantly, I'm getting the water away from the figs. I don't want that water to drain into my Rondi Bordeaux or into any of these other, the LSU Tiger or the Alma. I just let all of that water during this season, I let it drain away into the yard, you see, away from my fig trees. Remember, one of my mottos in growing figs, high and dry. Look, I'll back up again. I did this in my video at 7B. Just yesterday I posted it, I believe. And I showed you the elevation. And if we get down and look, can you see? Look at the elevation. High and dry. See, I follow my own advice all the time. And that water comes down, and it's a little unsightly, but I don't care. It's behind all the fig trees, and besides, the fig trees got to have a priority this time of year if you want to have some figs. And I let the water drain out into the field here, into the yard rather, and there will be no adverse consequences from the excess rain from the roof getting into the roots of the figs during the harvest and ruining the crop. And so that's a good practice. Sometimes, I never mentioned this ever, but sometimes when I have a tree that I love, here's a tree that I love. Love, love, love. Love your fig trees, and they'll love you back. Remember that. I say that a few times. I've said it. But this is my father's Celeste, it's a tree, and it's not a sentimental thing. Oh, well, that's not true. It is a sentimental thing, but that's not the reason why I love this tree, and I'm so enthusiastic about this tree. This is the best Celeste tree in all of the years that I have grown figs, my entire life, that I've ever encountered. I've told the story about this tree before. I sent away in California 30 years ago for this tree, more, for my father, for Father's Day gift. Back then, there was no internet, there was none of that stuff, and I had to locate this little nursery, and I believe that it somehow acquired some kind of an experimental. It was not too far from Davis, UC Davis. And I know they were doing experiments with the LSU figs. I just think it's a weird fig. And I'm not going to go into it right now. Someday I might just do a video about this tree. But when this tree was growing next to my father's house, not far from here, half a mile from here, we used to call it the $10,000 tree. It grew to be huge. He never covered it. No matter how cold the winter was, it never died. And it produced figs, so many delicious figs. And I've said this before, people used to come, and all my relatives are hearing me say this right now. They know this fig. They know my mom and dad, all my cousins, brothers, everybody. They know the story I'm telling. And it's the truth, absolutely. This tree was magnificent, truly magnificent. And no matter how many relatives came and drove from wherever they lived in whatever towns and they got figs, there was always more figs there. In a couple of days, there'd be another picking and another and another. It was just an unbelievable tree. I love this tree. Okay, I'm carrying on just a little bit excessively here. But I was saying something I never said before, like if it's going to rain and this is going to mature, and I love these figs so much, I mean, I will take a 12 by 12 tarp. It's an idea that maybe you can utilize sometimes. Might save your crop, and I'll throw it over a tree this big. See, I'll throw it over the tree. Maybe I'll put a couple rebarbs temporarily in the ground to hold the tent up, you might call it, and then I'll put some bricks around the circumference of the tree on the tarp, and then let it rain. And after the rain's all finished, I'll take the tarp away, and guess what? Relatively speaking, to trees that were not protected in that fashion, it will be relatively unharmed by the excessive rain, and you save a whole crop. You can do that with these little trees, and I like to tend to keep them little. I don't always keep them little. They get bigger, and if they get bigger, I don't chop them down for no reason. And sometimes, even if I can't care for them quite as much as I would like to, like look at the size of that Celeste, but it produces so many figs that I just let it grow, but I will chop it down. It might not be 1 year or the next year, but it'll be the 3rd year or the 4th year. I'll chop it down. So it's just a methodology. That's all it is. Now, let me just talk about another tree that is one of my all-time favorites in the world. I know I talked about this tree so many times, but look at it. Just look at this tree. Who would not be so proud and happy of this? This is a Rondi Bordeaux, and it went undamaged. It's unscathed by the winter, unprotected completely. And just look at all of the fruit on this tree. Every single place you look, there's fruit. Figs everywhere. They're just popping up, and they'll keep popping up. And this will make it sometimes three crops. 3, not just 2. Because they just keep making little figs. Look at it. And they just keep getting ripe. Like, look at that little baby, tiny little fig. Well, there'll be more of these. Can you see it? Look. And then there's bigger ones. And they don't take long to get ripe. Maybe 60, 65 days. And they're delicious. Oh, they're wonderful. And I hear people say, well, my Rondi Bordeaux that I had in the ground, and not many people have them in the ground that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of videos, and people talk about Celeste, and they say, well, it's not one of my favorite trees, but they don't have one, and they never show the tree. There's never one in the ground. In the ground is how you grow these things. I mean, Rondi Bordeaux, you can grow in a pot and get wonderful results. Celeste, I don't like the results. We've talked about this in other videos if you want to refer back to them. But these claims about, oh, well, my Rondi Bordeaux cracks and this and that. Well, remember, high and dry. Give your fig tree a chance. Don't grow it down where there's lots of water when it rains or where it stays wet half the season. Bring it back up to the high ground. Bring it back up. Look. Bring it up. Look where my tree is. Look where it's at. High ground. High and dry. And they don't crack. I mean, all figs will crack if you get, torrential rains and, one after another. But through an ordinary season, and you've seen me pick these figs, even in the rain or after the rain. And they're very good. And Rondi Bordeaux, the taste, it holds up after the rain too. Even when they crack, for some reason, they taste just as good as if they didn't crack. So providing you don't get too big cracks, they don't get spoiled. But I don't have that problem with any of my figs because I grow all of my figs high and dry. So unless it's an extraordinarily wet season, and then nothing's going to protect you, no matter where you have them planted. But unless it's an extraordinarily wet season, I just don't have that problem with my in-ground figs. And another thing too, with the figs that I have in containers, a lot of people put, drip irrigation and they just have it come on automatically every day. I don't do that. I never do that. I water my figs, and I've got videos on watering my figs if you want to watch them. I water my figs by hand. I know that some of the growers that have too many figs can't do that. I understand that. And that's probably a legitimate excuse. But you're still going to get bad results sometimes. Because a fig doesn't need water every day. Maybe it doesn't need water. You know what I do with mine? I pick up my containers every day. I just pick them up an inch off the ground. If they need water, I give it. And if they don't, I don't. But that methodology, that method, it pays huge dividends because I don't have cracked figs. I very seldom ever have cracked figs in my container figs. And they're always delicious and sweet. And you've seen my videos, and watch them if you haven't. Watch the videos. But that's how you can guarantee that they're not going to crack. And the people that are saying their figs are cracking, well, maybe they don't have them planted in the right place. Maybe they should select a higher piece of ground. Or maybe it's an extraordinary wet year and you just got to excuse that. And the next year will be better. Not every year is perfect. It's growing figs or growing anything organically or any kind of produce, regardless of what you're growing, from flowers to oranges. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect science, and there's variables, there's weather variables, there's so many variables. Like in the last video, I named it 1 million variables, and there is 1 million variables. And you need to keep your eye out. Keep a sharp eye out for all of these things. Try to observe things. Try to be observant. Love your figs. Give them love and care, and they will return all of your attention, and you will be rewarded accordingly. Okay? So I guess this video is starting to get a little too long. Look at this. This is my father's. Look at those Celeste. Look at them all. These are going to be so good to eat. I love this tree so much. I love all my trees. I'm not picking any favorites, really. I try not to. I do, I guess, inadvertently, and when I get carried away with my enthusiasm, I suppose. But I've also said many times, if you will note, that I don't like saying which ones I like the very, very most. I mean, because they're all good, and I like variety. And I think we all should appreciate the fact that there are varieties. And I try to stick with the varieties I can count on in my zone, and so that's what I do. Okay? I could talk more about the figs. I've got a bunch behind the barns that are doing wonderfully. Here's another Mount Aetna that I want to show you besides the Sicilian dart. Let me just put you on pause while I walk here. Okay, we're here. And this is just an unknown Mount Aetna that I've talked about for several years. And it's a very, very prolific and precocious fig variety. It's very fruitful, as you can see, and it's doing very well. And it was unprotected right here in the back of the house, right in the wind, tremendous winds, furious winds, very, very cold for figs, and yet it's done magnificently. And it's just everywhere you look on this tree, there's just figs everywhere on it. Look at it. So am I happy about it? Sure. And it does the same thing every year. And I mentioned before, a lot of times I give this fig tree as a gift to my friends and relatives because it's delicious. Keep in mind, as I've said, the Mount Aetnas aren't my absolute favorite tasting fig. They're very good. That doesn't mean they're not very, very, very good, because they are, especially when they're real ripe. But I don't just go by taste, I go by a lot of other characteristics, such as reliability and winter hardiness and a bunch of others. And this tree really fits every description. Okay, we're going to walk over to the back. I'm not going to talk about the figs, I'm just going to show them to you. And then I'm going to terminate this video. On the way, more wonderful blueberries. And the birds have been picking at them. I've got to get a net over this. Hold on, almost to the figs. Okay, so we approach this little fig garden I've featured this before. And it's the same story. This is the old man's fig, a Mount Aetna type, unknown, from Italy, that he brought with him. I told that story before, and I'll tell it again in the next video when I give you an update on these trees. But they are also just with a very heavy crop of figs everywhere, and there's a bunch of different varieties in here, and we'll talk about it when I make the next video. And there's some other things I really wanted to discuss with you too. This is my Feliciano Bianco here in New Jersey. I featured this same tree in my last video in Virginia, and it's making some nice Breville that are very exquisite and tasty. I once said, if you want to see this tree more mature, go back and look at my friend's video that he sent me from Israel, Danny Yakir. He's now deceased, and I posted his video that he sent me. Was a progress report of the cuttings that I gave him, and it was called, the video is called Fig Varieties of the World. He was one of the greatest growers that I ever had the sheer pleasure and privilege to associate with in this business of growing figs. He was a magnificent human being and a magnificent gardener. So, and I have other varieties here we're talking about. I'm not going to talk about them now. And they're all doing well. They all survived the winter, even though they were back here with no protection, and they suffered the harsh winter winds. They did very well, and they're producing really well too. See the little figs on here. This tree is another story. I don't know if I have time. I might as well, because you're just cut me off anyway if you don't want to hear this. But this is Brunswick, which I never talk about. And Brunswick, when it's dry, is a delicious tasting fig. And it's one of the favorites in Israel because it's a dry culture there. It's a very tasty fig. Okay, the Breville are very huge, and I don't like them. I mean, the flavor's okay, it's average. But the main crop figs are really good. But look at this tree. You see, it's not doing that well. Let me tell you why it's not doing that well. This tree was over there. I'll show you. This tree was over here just 8-9 days ago. And that's where I dug it up. And what I noticed, what did I do with? Oh, here it is. I noticed it wasn't doing well. And I'm saying to myself, my goodness, what's going on? And I thought, well, you know what? I must have left one of those wire tags that I have on my fig trees. You know what I'm talking about, so I won't go find one for you. We don't have time. I said, I must have left it on the bottom of the tree or something, and maybe it's wrapped around the trunk, and it's cutting into the bark, you know, and it's starving the tree of nutrients. And so it was at nighttime I was out here. And I started reaching down, you know, I was trying to feel for the wire and feel for the tag. I didn't feel anything. So I got my flashlight out, and when I did, that's when I saw this sticking up a little bit. I saw this sticking up. It was in a pot. And I had somehow forgotten that I had buried it, none of the others, but I had buried it in its pot without making any proper holes so the roots could get out very good. And they tried, but they couldn't, you see. And I must have put it there temporarily and then forgotten all about it. Old age, I guess. And so I was surprised when I saw that with a flashlight. And I went, what? Are you kidding me? And so I it was late. It was like 10 o'clock at night. And so I ran in the shed and I got my shovel and I dug it up. And so I transplanted it about 8 or 9 days ago. And it started to wilt because naturally it's a transplant. And it was real hot the next day. But then it started raining. We've gotten several inches of rain. I was away for a little while on a vacation, and now it's coming back. But Brunswick, and I'm going to let it grow right here. It's going to grow fine. It's very winter hardy. Brunswick is extremely hardy, and this is particularly very high ground, the back of my yard. Oh, you know what? I forgot one thing. I'm glad I'm getting it in the video. Those of you that held on, I hope some of you held on, because I have so much to talk about. I really could talk about every one of those individual figs and so many more. I haven't talked about my pawpaw or my other persimmon tree, but this is winter wheat. Look at this. Isn't this wonderful? Now, the farmer will soon harvest the crop. And I will get a chair, several chairs, because Debbie likes to watch too. And we'll watch the machinery, we'll watch these big machines go by, the combines, and take up the crop. It's just, I always just love watching the harvest. I enjoy, not just my own harvest, but other people's too. But look how beautiful this wheat crop is. I'm going to walk in here a little bit. Look at that. How nice. Wonderful. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Ever since the invasion of the Russians, I don't talk politics, but in the Ukraine, there's been a shortage, apparently, an international shortage of a kind, I suppose. And so a lot of the farmers now have switched from soybean to wheat. Good idea. And that will help keep the price of bread and other wheat products. But wheat and rye, you see it now planted in many of the farmers' fields, whereas before it was mostly soybean. And thankfully, the farmers are planting more asparagus now too. For many years, when I was a kid growing up, many years ago, asparagus was a common thing to see in New Jersey, but then there was a virus that affected almost every crop, and all of the farmers that were growing asparagus either switched to another crop or went out of business. And so all of a sudden there was no more asparagus in New Jersey. Now they've gotten a few varieties that are virus resistant, and I'm seeing a comeback of the asparagus, and I'm happy to say. But I'm getting off the subject now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for visiting. I have so much more I want to say. By the way, thank you for subscribing. It's the only way that I really can get the feedback. And I really do appreciate your subscriptions, and I appreciate your views. I appreciate your comments. I can't answer them all, but I try. Some of them I've answered already in my videos, so I just refer you back to the videos, or I make mention of that. Please don't be offended. It's just impossible for one guy like me to keep up with all of that, but I do my best. But it doesn't mean I don't appreciate your participation and your views and your comments. So thank you very much. I've got a lot more to share with you. It's almost infinite, honestly. It is. I myself did not realize just how intricately involved everything really is tied together. And I'm not quite satisfied that I've completed my mission, but all of you have helped me to almost complete my mission, and that is before I get too old or pass away, I thought that I would share my knowledge and my experience for whatever it's worth. There's that often used caveat that I just love. I wanted to use the internet and use YouTube and this modern day technology, something I didn't have when I was younger. I wanted to use it to transfer all of the information over to you, the public, the greater public. Hopefully I've been able to make an impact on you, especially you newbies out there, you new growers. And that was my mission, always from the start. I don't feel I've completed it, so I'm going to continue to make the videos, and thank you for your participation. And when I finally feel that I've accomplished my goal, I'll let you know, and then you will have heard the last of me. Okay, very good. Thank you. With that, good day.